Hi. Hello.
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 Hello, and welcome to Architecting.
So I feel like I'm at a real disadvantage here because with everybody else, I've got to listen to their talks before I talk to them, and with you guys, it's a mystery of what's going to be going on. But first, can we each of you introduce yourselves and and then we'll kind of dive into what you're going to get into tomorrow.
I'm Dean Maltz, a managing partner of Shigeru Ban Architects.
Let's see, what else describes you? You don't have to, but Laura's pushing the microphone back to you. But
Okay. And tomorrow we're going to be talking about Shigeru Ban work based around our mass timber and other wood projects, which is a culmination of Shigeru Ban's work since 1985 to now.
We're here. Laura, introduce yourself.
I'm Laura Britton. I'm an associate at Shigeru Ban Architects, and I'm the author-editor of Shigeru Ban Timber and Architecture, which we published last year. And building on the theme of Engage for this year's conference, Dean and I are presenting alongside Greg Kingsley from KLNA. And so we'll be talking about the integrated collaborative working process for building these fabulous timber structures that really require a lot of disciplines. It's not just an architect working in a vacuum, so we are engaging.
Right. So Dean, give us a little background on, did you worked on the Aspen Museum?
Yes.
Yes. So give us a little background of how that came to your firm and the sort of process of development.
Yeah, sure. So there was a committee set up at the Aspen Art Museum. It was led by the director, Heidi Zuckerman. They interviewed a number of notable architects at the time, including Diller Scofidio Renfro. We interviewed, it was myself, Shigeru, and Nina Friedman, who was director of our office at that time. And after the interview, all the board members and Heidi unanimously selected Shigeru Ban Architects to be their architect. It was great that we were able to win this great award without having to do any design work. Which
interesting.
Common among any major competitions.
So what was the idea, the concept that you guys came to the table with that won it? I mean, were you talking about the vision for the museum at all, without obviously designing and drawing? But
well, we discussed our approach to design, and I think we described ourselves and how we work, and looking at our team, with Shigeru being a great designer, myself to manage the business aspects of the project, and then Nina, the director, to manage the project. They just felt very comfortable that we had all the boxes checked.
And what year was this?
Well, actually, that started in 2004.
Oh, okay.
We did a concept design on a piece of property that they were hoping to lease from the city, and we did a design. It was a beautiful design. It's closer to the ball field and the Hotel Jerome. But unfortunately, there was a referendum, and was referendum by the people of the city, and it didn't pass referendum. So then the board of directors had to find land that they could purchase, and that's caused a delay. They found land on Hyman Street. They purchased it, and then we were asked to do another concept design. So interestingly enough, that the building shape changed from what was going to be a linear building that was going, down a slope to a cubic building.
Right.
That was on the corner.
Did the sort of besides the proportions, did the overall concept kind of stay the same? That idea of the screening and or maybe explain the concept.
So the concept of the building was to be contextual, and Shigeru, whenever he comes up with a concept, he has to go to the site first. He looks at the program, he has it in the back of his mind, he goes to the site, he walks around, and then he comes up with a determination of what the project should be. So in developing this concept, there were a number of ideas that he wanted to incorporate. One of the contextual ideas was how to relate the building to the other buildings that were downtown. And there are other red brick buildings that are cubic. He wanted to interpret that using sustainable materials, natural materials. Initially, we were going to create a screen out of beetle kill and actually build bricks out of it, but then further exploration of that idea, we realized that facade would degrade over time, so it was not the best concept. So that's when we had come up with the idea of using Protima, which is a wood product. It's actually a wood veneer, and it's a laminate material. And what Shigeru liked about that, laminate is actually a series of paper that's compressed together with a type of glue, and then on the exterior is wood, so it gets all compressed. So that being a wood product that passed the tests of what he was looking for. And then the other major aspect of the building was that nature is the most beautiful thing. So we designed the grand stair to take you to the top and a moving elevator that would take you to the top. So the building is to be viewed from the top down. That's the proper way of seeing the Aspen Art Museum, top down, like the Guggenheim Museum.
Right.
But Shigeru's reason for going to the top is that when you get to the terrace, you see the natural surroundings of the mountains, and he felt that the mountains are the most beautiful art, I guess, in Aspen.
Right. Yeah. Right. And then Laura, when did you join the firm?
I joined in 2015.
2015. And so, were you brought in to really start to document start to create this book and document these projects?
The book came out of a lot of conversations that we've had in the past 5 years probably, and even before that. When I first joined the firm, I was working on Terrace House, which is a hybrid mass timber residential project in Vancouver, British Columbia, and I've almost exclusively worked on mass timber projects in the past 8 years. We have a book from, I believe it was 2010?
Yeah, actually it was 2010.
Paper and Architecture, which was really documenting Shigeru's humanitarian work, other larger structures that also were paper tube structures. And so we had these conversations constantly. Shigeru is kind of known as the paper architect, but actually he's done more mass timber than just about anybody. And we're really happy that it's a more popular subject nowadays. But going back even 13 years ago, Centre Papi du Metz opened. Extremely complex timber grid shell. So we wanted to consolidate that, use it kind of as a primer on timber, not just mass timber, but any type of timber construction, and really share more than a traditional monograph through that book.
Yeah, it's interesting. Greg Kingsling's been on the podcast before, and inspiring guy, and talking. He was talking a little bit about the process there and just the complexities of this amazing museum. But that is sort of in the past now. Like taking that experience and that of that museum and of the other mass timber projects, what has the firm been doing now and sort of like looking into the future, excited about with mass timber and different strategies or concepts or projects?
Currently, we're working on new mass timber project, multifamily mass timber project in Florida that we're very excited about. Also, another project which is a park, Kentucky Owl Park, which is a distillery, and it's an aggregation of multiple buildings: a distillery, visitor center, train station, a rick house, which if you don't know what that means, it's a storage for barrels of whiskey. It's a particular name, a rick house, because the barrels get put on ricks. And then all of these buildings are surrounding 4 lakes. And that water is beautiful water that comes filtered through the limestone, which is then going to be used for making the whiskey. And all these buildings are made out of mass timber. So I think, getting back to why we made this book, I'd like to ask you a question.
Sure.
When you think of Shigeru Ban, what is the first thing you think about?
I think about the paper chapel in New Zealand. That's the first image that comes to my head. Yeah, but
and that's a good one, because I ask this question to a lot of people. Lay people, architects know Shigeru, but usually the first response will be the paper architect. And other people will respond and say, well, I'm really familiar with his humanitarian work. And the last thing that may come up would be, and they'll say he's a Pritzker architect, but they won't necessarily mention the timber architecture. And I believe that Shigeru Ban is the leading timber architect in the world, and there are many other architects that are designing in timber, but I guess Shigeru's particular specialty is his inventiveness with using timber. I think that's why we're invited to the conference, and that's why we made this book. We wanted to show in a very concise way his whole trajectory of invention within wood. He loves to invent with materials. And so there's been a journey from the early invention with paper, creating paper structures that were, he got building department approval to have permanent paper tube structures, and he was inventive with plywood, making grid shell structures, and then evolved in the last 20 years doing mass timber, which is his first great achievement was Centre Pompidou Metz.
Right.
One thing that we talk about a lot between the two books is that Shigeru has a consistent ethos. So it's these ideas of a sustainable, responsible approach, as Dean was mentioning, choosing the material that's appropriate to the project. And Shigeru likes to say, if a building is loved, it becomes permanent. So this Christchurch cardboard cathedral, it will continue to stand. It could have been a temporary structure, but it's so loved, it will endure. And so one question we get a lot of times with timber projects is, is this going to last? Is it going to catch fire? Is it safe? And Shigeru really takes the perspective of building stewardship. If you have a community that cares about a project, they will take care of it and it will last forever. So one project that we're going to show, kind of the only project that isn't our own in tomorrow's presentation, is the Horyuji Temple in Japan, which is over 1,300 years old. It's the oldest timber structure in the world. It still stands today because it has precise detailing, excellent construction, and it's cherished by its community. So it will continue to stand. And so that's kind of what Shigeru is advocating, whether it's paper, wood, any other material, really, taking stewardship of the building.
Yeah. And can you talk about some of those specific innovations within mass timber that Shigeru and the firm has been doing?
Yes. He's been creating very inventive structures with post and beam. He built, I think it was 2008, the Tamedia building in Switzerland, which was the tallest mass timber building in Switzerland at that time, which he created these bents in the columns and beams that were put together with these oval beams that created the joint, so he could then put the wood together without using metal. In the Aspen Art Museum, he created a wood space frame. It's never been done before. I don't think it's ever been done since. I'm not familiar with a wood space frame. And what's particularly unique about that is that typical space frames will have a node and a stick that come together. But this space frame is just pure wood. There's the nodes are the wood coming together with the top chord and the bottom chord and the undulating web, and all that holds it together are pins and screws. He's created fantastic structures, grid shell structures, starting with the Metz Pompidou building, and more recently he created a campus of 500,000 square feet for the Swatch Omega headquarters in Biel, Switzerland, which is he created an undulating serpentine building that's the Swatch headquarters. I just wanted to sort of mention that Shigeru is not a wood purist. He likes to use. He's inventive within all materials. He's used carbon fiber to make furniture. He's used the cardboard tubes to make refugee housing and the Christ Church that you mentioned. And when you look at the Aspen Art Museum, it has traditional materials of concrete, which are always used for making foundations in the permanent building. And then between and then it's primarily a concrete building, and then between the concrete and the space frame roof, there are these trifurcated columns which suspend the roof. And then we used some paper within the building. We used it as partitions. We even used it as furniture and ceiling.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the subject of why wood for Shigeru it's what drew me to Shigeru Ban's work. Shigeru's constantly advancing the discipline, so with every project, he's building on the last one in a really interesting way. One thing we're going to talk about tomorrow is kind of the difference between these postcard beautiful images you get of a building, but then how did it come to be that way? Nice. Really looking at Shigeru's initial sketches and how he's thinking from the outset in a structural, material way rather than applying a structural concept to a sketch or applying a material to a sketch. And so if you're looking at something like the Centre Pompidou Metz, would you think that it's actually a Vierendeel structure? Nobody would say that, right? You'd think, oh, it's these intersecting beams, but he developed this innovative approach to a grid shell to minimize the number of connections between members. And so then that concept comes up again, I think it's maybe 8 years later. There's a project in Japan called the Shonai Hotel Suite and Terrace, and it has a small spa with a domed roof, and we kind of call it a mini Metz. It's reappropriating that structure in a very different form And so you see these themes coming up in very different ways, never a copy-paste of something he's done before. The Aspen Art Museum trusts, we're building on that for the Kentucky Owl Distillery, which is a set of 3 pyramidal space frames. And so it's always an evolution, and it's always something new and driving the discipline forward. I think the other great thing that we see a lot with Shigeru's work, that hopefully we'll see with others' work, is selective use of hardwood. We talk a lot about, there's a lot of emphasis on softwoods, and we're talking about spruce, pine, fir all the time. But Shigeru implements these beech dowels in the Tamedia project that Dean was referencing, and several other projects where you have these really intense forces at a joint. It's a beautiful way to resolve the structure without having exposed metal fasteners.
Right. Yeah. And that's, you asked, like, what do I think about him when I hear his name, and it is extreme, I'd say, innovation, but in like a grounded way of it's not innovation for innovation's sake in a way, or a formal sake, but it is it's really a high understanding of material and the possibilities, and I'm excited to see, especially the book, and hear more of it in the talk, of just seeing a deep look into the iterations of this innovation, excited.
There are too many things to talk about, so I'm forgetting mid-thought. With the Swatch headquarters, that's a particularly fascinating one. It's one of the most complex mass timber projects in the world. It didn't have a set of conventional construction documents, which is pretty amazing. It was just a parametric model to resolve the integration of the facade and all of the building systems. And so one thing that we love about that project is it's actually designed like a Swatch watch. And so the story behind that is the Swatch watch has an integrated base to it. It's molded plastic that the mechanism sits into, and that reduces the thickness and the cost of a Swatch watch. Shigeru did the same thing for the Swatch headquarters, integrating the structure to have the building services pass through it, very precisely sizing all of the cooling systems, the electrical, plumbing, being mindful of the wood grain, being mindful of not having too many apertures close together so that it would weaken the structure, coordinating all of that in a single parametric model. And then the result of that is actually a much better construction process. All of the pieces came together on site like puzzle pieces. And one thing we'll talk about tomorrow is, a typical building, you might expect up to 15% of the pieces arriving on site to have an error with it. For the Swatch headquarters, it was 0.1%. It was 72 out of 15,000 components that came to site because it was all figured out in advance. And so using the drawing and modeling and design process to drive that forward is really fascinating.
Oh, yeah, exciting. Well, I thank you again for coming to Colorado. Thanks for sitting down with me. And
I want to add a little bit more for people who have been to the Aspen Art Museum or who will have the opportunity to experience. Every person I've met who's been to the museum has said it's a place of joy, it's a place of relaxation, and it integrates a philosophy of Shigeru when he designs museums. He's looking to make places that are accessible to the community. One of the reasons we have the open screen is because he wanted people to be able to look into the museum. And then from the inside of the museum, you could be able to look out, and so to draw people into it. And the building is, not a depository for art. It's a Kunsthal, so it's a non-collecting art museum. It was very important to create a place that would bring the community together, and just to enjoy art.
Right. Yeah. I love it. Well, great. Looking forward to it tomorrow, and thanks for coming.
Bill, thanks for having us.
Thanks.
You can visit architecting.com, that's architect-ing.com, to see images from this week's guest.
And please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.
Have a great week and keep connecting.